Listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Val, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Monday, December 29th issue of the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The first article is by Alex Leary. Trump cites progress after talking to Putin and Zelensky. Talks on Sunday to end the Ukraine war spurred fresh optimism from President Trump, yet no clear signs that the two sides reached a breakthrough as Russia continues to push for land gains and reject a ceasefire. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Trump met Sunday at Mar-a-Lago to go over a 20-point draft that has been revised by Ukrainian and U.S. negotiators in recent weeks in the latest attempt to end the nearly four-year war. That came after Trump spoke by phone with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Zelensky hopes Trump will apply more pressure on Putin to reach a deal. Despite the hopeful talk, neither side gave details of what was resolved or otherwise unveiled concrete signs of steps toward an agreement. I think both presidents want to make a deal, Trump told reporters after Zelensky's arrival. Hours later, Trump maintained that optimism, but noted major obstacles remain, including over what will happen to contested territory Russia wants. This is not a one-day process deal. This is very complicated stuff, Trump told reporters, Zelensky at his side. The Kremlin said that Putin agreed to a proposal to create two working groups, one focused on security issues and the other focused on economic matters. The terms for the commencement of these working groups will be further agreed upon in the near future, likely in early January, according to a Putin aide statement about the call. Trump said the U.S. side will be represented by several officials, including his envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Trump said his call with Putin went well and lasted about 2.5 hours. President Putin was very generous in his feeling toward Ukraine succeeding, including supplying energy, electricity, and other things at very low prices, Trump said. A lot of good things came out of that call. Zelensky smirked and quietly laughed at the remark about Putin's hope for the country. Trump and Zelensky also held an hour-long call with European leaders. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen praised the progress though in a statement on X said, paramount to this effort is to have ironclad security guarantees from day one. Going into the summit, the main sticking points were the future of approximately 20% of the Donetsk region that Russia wants to surrender to it, the status of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, Europe's largest, that is currently under Russian occupation, and details of security guarantees that Washington would provide for Ukraine. Before meeting Trump, Zelensky on Sunday highlighted Russia's stepped-up attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure in recent days that have left swaths of the country without power. He said he was there not only to talk about ending the war, but also ensuring that pressure on Russia remained high, with effective sanctions and new air defenses for Ukraine. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Sunday that Zelensky and Europe aren't ready to engage in constructive talks. He called European countries the main obstacles to peace and said Moscow remained committed to working with the U.S. to devise lasting agreements for addressing the conflict's root causes. Language the Kremlin also often uses for concessions Ukraine sees as capitulation. Trump and Zelensky have had an uneven relationship since the American president returned to power in January, with Trump alternately pressuring his Ukrainian counterpart to make deep concessions and seeming to side with him amid ongoing frustration with Putin. The 20-point plan that has been adapted from an original 28-point proposal from the U.S. that came under criticism for being too favorable to Moscow, including calling on Ukraine to cede the eastern Donbass region, now under its control, to Moscow and accept Russia's de facto control over other parts of Ukraine where the front line would be frozen. The new draft agreement calls for a referendum in Ukraine on the territorial concessions, as well as presidential elections. Ukraine has started preparing for a vote, which could be carried out in person and online to allow the participation of millions of Ukrainians abroad. Kyiv has resisted giving up Ukrainian territory in Donetsk, citing restrictions on its constitution. The U.S. is proposing a demilitarized free economic zone in the area. Zelensky has said he is ready to consider the idea if Russia also withdraws its forces from parts of the Donetsk region under its control. Russia hasn't accepted those terms and continues to push for control of the Donetsk region. One day before talks here, Russia unleashed a ballistic missile and drone attack on the Ukraine's capital. In a video released Saturday night, Putin accused Ukraine of being the obstacle to a resolution and said that if Kyiv authorities are not willing to end the matter peacefully, we will achieve all the goals we have in the special military operation by military means. The 20-point plan stems from a proposal drafted by Trump's envoys Witkoff and Kushner, with input from the Russian envoy Kirill Dmitriev. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Rybakov said the Kremlin and the U.S. are closer to resolving the conflict in Ukraine, but that it would be inappropriate to set any deadlines, state news agency TASS reported on Friday. He said the plan discussed between the U.S. and Russia significantly differs from the plan publicized by Ukraine, according to the state news agency RIA Novosti. Chip Cutter has written an article called Hiring Expected to Stay Stagnant in 2026. Big companies are reluctant to add staff amid economic uncertainty and AI gains. The corporate playbook for next year? Don't hire. Companies are looking to stay lean into 2026 while relying on technology to take on more tasks. Forecasters at job sites indeed expect relatively minimal hiring growth in 2026, and e-commerce platform Shopify and Chime Financial are already vowing to keep the size of their employee bases roughly flat. At a gathering of CEOs in Midtown Manhattan this month, organized by the Yale School of Management, 66% of the leaders surveyed said they plan to either fire workers or maintain the size of their existing teams next year. Only a third indicated that they plan to hire. You're going to see a lot of wait and see, said Chris Layden, chief executive of staffing company Kelly Services. Some of the looming uncertainty will mean that we're going to continue to see an investment in capital over people. Companies haven't been in the hiring mood for months. The unemployment rate rose to 4.6% in November, its highest in 4 years. While the U.S. added jobs in fields such as healthcare and education in 2025, signs are growing that the white-collar labor market is now seizing up. A range of prominent employers, such as Amazon, Verizon, Target, and United Parcel Service have cut white-collar roles in recent months, adding to unease among workers. The reluctance to add staff reflects concerns about the economy, along with the belief that artificial intelligence could handle more work inside major companies. Other employers hired too many people after the pandemic and are still correcting for that. We're close to zero job growth. That's not a healthy labor market, Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller said at the Yale Summit. When I go around and talk to CEOs around the country, everyone's telling me, look, we're not hiring because we're waiting to try to figure out what happens with AI. What jobs can it replace? What jobs do we don't? The pause in hiring could be temporary if companies decide they do require more people to meet their growth goals. But the mood now, Waller said, is that companies simply don't need any extra labor. Everybody is afraid for their jobs. I'm dead serious, said Waller, a candidate to become the next chair of the Federal Reserve. This environment means many employees are clinging to their jobs. At International Business Machines, employees are leaving the technology giant at the lowest rate in 30 years, CEO Avram Krishna said. In the U.S., voluntary attrition at IBM is now under 2%, a decline from the typical 7%. People aren't looking to change jobs, Krishna said. Then that leads to less hiring because people aren't leaving. At a conference recently, a top executive at Shopify was asked to describe the company's hiring plans, and he gave an increasingly common answer. I don't see us next year needing to increase headcount in any way, Chief Financial Officer Jeff Hoffmeister said. It's been over 2 years we've been at this headcount. As I look to next year, I think we can continue to be disciplined on headcount. At Wells Fargo, CEO Charlie Scharf said this month the bank expected to have fewer people as it heads into next year. The company's workforce has fallen from roughly 275,000 people in 2019 to about 210,000 today, as executives have cut costs and overhauled the bank. Scharf says he expects AI's impact on staffing levels to be extremely significant, though it could take years to play out. He said many executives have been afraid to lay out the damage that AI could do to the job market. No one wants to stand up and say that we're going to have lower headcount in the future, Scharf said. It's a difficult thing to say. Wells Fargo will continue to retain its workforce and use attrition as our friend, he said, but change is clear. It's not going to totally replace humans, but it does create an opportunity to do things significantly different, he said. Economists at Indeed recently updated hiring scenarios for the year ahead, expecting more of the same. Analyzing job openings along with estimates for economic growth, they now predict the unemployment rate to hover around 4.6% in 2026. We're not expecting things to change a whole lot in 2026, said Laura Ulrich, Director of Economic Research at Indeed. Some of the weakest industries for new job openings include those in well-paid fields such as data analytics, software development, marketing, and entertainment, she said. Job postings are stronger in industries such as healthcare and construction. Though there's been a pullback in white-collar employment, Ulrich said the current dynamics may eventually need to change. If the economy expands next year, some employers may decide they need to hire more people to grow. You can't have this low hire, low fire environment with growing GDP for too long, she said. At some point, something has to shift. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Roshan Fernandez has written a story, Trade Schools Are Having Their Moment. On a recent Tuesday here, high schoolers watched a cat get an ultrasound on the on-campus veterinary clinic, practiced installing electrical wiring to power a building, repaired pipes on a water heater, and fixed dents in a car hood. That is a routine day at Worcester Technical High School in Massachusetts, where hundreds of kids vie for admissions. The waiting list has run between 600 and 800 students in recent years, the principal said. It's kind of like the school to go to, said Funbi Fatoki, 18 years old, who graduated as valedictorian in May and now attends the University of Massachusetts Amherst. The sentiment isn't isolated. The Massachusetts vocational high school system, more than a century old and among the oldest in the U.S., has become a coveted pathway, driven in part, counterintuitively, by teens who end up going to college. Enrollments in these programs has grown around 25% since the 2011-2012 school year, according to the Pioneer Institute, a Boston-based public policy think tank. 2/3 of graduates pursue post-secondary education, according to a 2022 book published by the Institute. I feel like it would give me a head start in my college career, said Matthew Fogg, a junior at Neshoba Valley Technical High School, who is interested in construction engineering. I feel like it would give me a stronger base than most people who would just be coming out of a regular high school. Vocational programs were long seen as places to silo academic underperformers into blue-collar work, administrators said. They recalled unsavory nicknames and a persistent stigma. In the 90s and the early 2000s, we were trying to get whoever would come to us, said Brian Potter, assistant principal at Worcester Tech. Now 5,000 to 10,000 students fill waiting lists statewide, according to the Massachusetts Association of Vocational Educators. Demand is so high that in May, the state said it would require trade schools to go to a lottery system for ninth graders starting in 2026. You see the enthusiastic eighth grader dragging the skeptical parents to open house events 2 years ago, said Tom Hickey, the superintendent of South Shore Regional Vocational Technical High School. Now I see equal enthusiasm. Many students pursue post-secondary education to advance their trade. Fatoki, the valedictorian, became a certified nursing assistant at the Worcester Tech High School and now is in college on a pre-med track. She wants to be an anesthesiologist. Dario Estrada, a plumbing student at Worcester Tech, wants to study business management in a community college so he can open his own plumbing practice. Put them all together, the junior said, of his skill set. Jillian Hecking plans to become a veterinarian, which means college and then vet school. At a veterinary assisting student at the Neshoba Valley Tech, the junior already handles of all sizes, including cows her teacher brought to class. We want to work with our hands, but we also strive for a higher education and learning, she said. Like many others, Hecking is the first in her family to go to vocational school. Families like the Heckings are recognizing the upside, particularly as artificial intelligence disrupts the labor market. Ed Bukuyan noticed more students from affluent families at Minuteman Regional Vocational Technical High School in upscale Lexington, Massachusetts, as parents' attitude shifts. They realized that their students would have an advantage if they had specialization they now enjoyed, said the now retired superintendent. If I decide I want to go to college, I can always still have collision as something I can go back onto, said Isabel Doty, an auto collision junior at Worcester Tech. Employers aren't always happy when vocational students head to college. They invest time in them, anticipating they will remain with the company after high school graduation. College-bound students can rub the employers in the wrong way, said Worcester Tech principal Drew Weymouth. More than half of students there pursue post-secondary education. Other students plan to forego college but continue their certifications. At Neshoba Valley Tech, most grads enter the workforce directly. Mariana Lords, a junior there, wants to do an apprenticeship to earn her journeyman electrician license. Any directions you want to go, your options are open, said Denise Pigeon, superintendent of Neshoba Valley Tech. To select a discipline, students rotate through programs during an exploratory first semester. They are then placed in a shop based on preferences, grades, and available seats. They split their time between traditional academics and shop work. There is still room for sports clubs, AP classes, and other school staples. Massachusetts vocational education draws national attention. The state distinguished itself in part by requiring districts to have advisory committees that work closely with the industry, said Steve Sherrick, executive director of the Massachusetts Association of Vocational Administrators. This collaboration keeps trade schools aware of job growth trends so that they can adapt the curriculum, he said. This gold standard that we offer in Massachusetts, said Eric Duda, the superintendent of Pathfinders Regional Vocational Technical High School, is just a model for all. Surrogate mothers can face big debts as industry blooms. This is an article on private equity firms by Catherine Long. Nia Trent Wilson owes $182,889.63 in medical bills for a baby that wasn't hers. In late 2021, she agreed to act as a surrogate through an agency that paired her with a gay couple from Washington, D.C. The terms were typical: $70,000 plus fees in the event of potential health complications, and a promise that the intended parents would cover medical costs. Trent Wilson has been a surrogate twice before and thought she knew what to expect. But this time, the pregnancy went badly sideways. Serious medical complications forced doctors to remove her uterus and fallopian tubes. She went home with a bill. The parents went home with the baby. Since its inception in the 1980s, surrogacy has been described by industry leaders and practitioners as an intimate gift to struggling parents from generous surrogates. Tens of thousands of people, including infertile and same-sex couples, have had babies through the advances of in vitro fertilization and the willingness of surrogates to carry those children. But surrogacy in the United States has surged into a multi-billion-dollar industry in which women who bear the children have few financial or other protections, and even are sometimes surprised by strangers wielding legal documents taking the babies away after birth. Once a pregnancy begins, a surrogate holds little leverage if payments aren't forthcoming. Agencies, some owned by corporate chains, lock surrogates into arrangements that one California judge has called the contractual use of a woman's body for a profit-venturing business. In Trent Wilson's case, the judge said, the deal put a no-risk obligation on the agency while creating tremendous risk for the surrogate. Surrogacy is part of a broader fertility industry, a sprawling network that also includes IVF clinics, surgical centers, and concierge services in which private equity has made aggressive inroads. Trent Wilson discovered that when the parents of the child she carried defaulted on what she believed were their financial obligations, she was suddenly on her own. We're out there to fend for ourselves, she said. The couple, Jason St. Fleur and Ricky Scott, didn't respond to requests for comment. Despite the physical and emotional risks placed on the surrogates, the practice remains almost entirely unregulated. Lopsided contracts and disparities in wealth mean that when things turn sour, it's often surrogates who bear costs they can rarely afford, including medical bills and attorney fees, according to interviews with more than 40 surrogates, agency owners, and surrogacy attorneys, and a review of court records and business filings. Few surrogates feel comfortable speaking out when things go wrong. Clauses in the contract bar them from sharing the identities of the parents they worked with. There is an imbalance of power, said Angelo Richardson-Mook, founder of the New York agency Alsea Surrogacy. Surrogacy is expensive, and the average person seeking surrogacy has more resources at their fingertips than the people applying to be a surrogate. The U.S. is a leader in the global surrogacy industry. In 2023, the most recent year data was available, nearly 11,000 surrogates underwent an embryo transfer, a figure that is more than doubled since 2014, according to data that represents around 95% of IVF procedures collected by an industry group. In the race to recruit surrogates to meet booming demand, not every agency follows practices suggested by organizations such as the Society for Ethics for Egg Donation and Surrogacy to screen out women in precarious financial or living situations, surrogates say. Only one state, New York, actively regulates surrogacy business, requiring agency owners to undergo a background check, demonstrate they follow screening guidelines, and provide surrogates a document explaining their legal rights. Elsewhere, many agencies operate with only a business license and a sole proprietor or small staff. It isn't uncommon for them to run into legal or financial difficulties, shut down, and then reopen under a different name, according to a review of business records. Demand for surrogates vastly exceeds supply, industry professionals say. Agencies compete over pay and benefits for surrogates who meet standards for age and weight, and requirements have had at least one prior uncomplicated pregnancy. Some agencies' advertisements say surrogates can expect six-figure payouts without disclosing that base pay is much lower and that higher payments usually only take place in the event of major medical complications. Surrogates can earn $80,000 to $100,000 while receiving full medical, legal, and emotional care throughout the journey, read an October Facebook advertisement for Yunda Surrogacy, a California agency co-founded by Chinese television producer Zhang Heng. Other sites cite a $70,000 payment. But the company's website says that base compensation for surrogates usually starts at $50,000. Rising infertility rates and the fragmented nature of the fertility industry have made it a ripe target for investment groups and private equity firms, which have acquired clinics and agencies in an effort to create one-stop shops for couples seeking to have a baby via surrogate. Since 2022, Manhattan private equity group Cortec has enrolled up three leading surrogacy agencies into North Star Fertility Partners, venture-backed fertility giant Kindbody, with 27 locations nationwide, purchased the Chicago agency in 2022 for an undisclosed amount. 3 surrogates told the Journal they were left with medical debt. Emily Hurst, a surrogate in Arkansas, was left with more than $7,000 in medical bills and ongoing dental problems. The morning sickness she endured had eroded the enamel on her teeth. One day, after she posted about the debt in a popular surrogacy Facebook group, some bills were paid. The agency did not respond to requests for comment. Trent Wilson, who lives in Texas, interviewed with several surrogacy agencies before settling on ACRC Global of California in late 2021. The agency matched her with St. Fleur, an attorney, and his partner Scott, a filmmaker. Trent Wilson assumed that ACRC had done a thorough background check on the couple. They hadn't, according to the agency's court testimony in a lawsuit Trent Wilson later filed against it. If they had, they might have seen that the couple had a history of unpaid debts, according to judgments and lawsuits reviewed by the Journal. By early 2022, the couple had transferred $95,000 into an escrow account, and an IVF clinic transferred 2 embryos supplied by Scott and St. Fleur into Trent Wilson's uterus. In court, ACRC's CEO, Shen Li, said the agency believed the couple's ability to place so much money at once into an escrow account was sufficient proof of their financial suitability. Filings in a separate 2024 suit showed that Scott had taken out a $60,000 loan several months prior to signing the surrogacy contract. He defaulted and owes $51,205.80, according to the lender, SoFi. Only one of the 2 embryos took. The parents seemed to take the loss as a crushing blow, Trent Wilson said. At the doctor's office, one of them called her a baby killer, she said in an interview with the Journal. The relationship quickly broke down as the couple accused Trent Wilson of refusing drug tests and concealing medical records, according to court records, documents, and messages reviewed by the Journal. They also stopped making payments into the escrow account that covered Trent Wilson's expenses, including her health insurance premiums, according to the records. Late in her 3rd trimester, doctors diagnosed her with placenta accreta, a potentially life-threatening condition in which the placenta grows too far into the wall of the uterus. Doctors warned her they would likely remove her uterus during the delivery. By the time she delivered, the escrow account was nearly empty. Scott and St. Fleur picked up the baby on the day of delivery. For months after her delivery, the bills kept coming. Trent Wilson forwarded them to the escrow agency with no response. The parents also stopped responding. In addition to the mounting bills, the parents hadn't paid Trent Wilson $44,800 in fees laid out by her contract, including payments intended to compensate her for the C-section and loss of her reproductive organs, $10,000 for her uterus and $5,000 for her fallopian tubes, according to court records. During her recovery, she had also lost her job transporting medical supplies and was out of work. She dipped into her savings and her son's college fund and asked for donations on Spot Fund and GoFundMe. ACRC refused to help. We have done everything we can and properly, the agency's CEO, Lee, told Trent Wilson, according to messages reviewed by the Journal. Trent Wilson filed a lawsuit against ACRC in Orange County, alleging that the agency breached its contract with her by matching her with unsuitable parents. In early November, a judge ruled that the part of her contract that capped the agency's liability at $4,000 was unenforceable. He said the agreement drafted by the agency used the surrogate's body for a profit-venturing business, and that the risks Trent Wilson took were out of proportion with the agency's. The judge ordered the agency to pay her $20,000. About half of that is going to her attorney, she said. ACRC is considering appealing, according to correspondence reviewed by the Journal. In an email to the Journal, Lee, ACRC CEO, denied the allegations of the lawsuit. Trent Wilson is considering suing the parents, but worries it will be hard to get them to pay. I would like stricter guidelines, she said. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal, on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Lydia Wheeler has written an article called DOJ Targets Firms on DEI Using Fraud Law. The Trump administration has launched investigations into the use of diversity initiatives in hiring and promotion at major U.S. companies built on the novel use of a federal law meant to punish businesses that cheat the government. The civil probes are proceeding under the umbrella of the False Claims Act, which has traditionally been used to go after contractors who bill the government for work that was never performed or who inflate the cost of services rendered. Now the Justice Department is embracing the theory that holding a federal contract while still considering diversity when hiring is in effect fraud against the government that entitles it to recoup potentially millions of dollars. Alphabet's Google and Verizon Communications are among a list of companies that have received Justice Department demands for documents and information about their workplace programs, according to people familiar with the investigations. Other companies being scrutinized come from industries ranging from automotive and pharmaceuticals to defense and utilities, the people familiar with the investigation said, and some have met in person with Justice Department officials. A complete list of companies being targeted couldn't be learned. Google and Verizon declined to comment. False claims investigations are commonly initiated after a whistleblower or an internal government watchdog has tipped the Justice Department off to alleged fraud. The DEI probes, however, have been spurred by politically appointed officials in the department who believe companies with contracts aren't abiding by their obligations to the government if they still embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. In a May enforcement memo, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche ordered a new initiative that directed the department to investigate and, as appropriate, pursue claims against any recipient of federal funds who knowingly engages in preferences that create benefits or burdens based on race, ethnicity, or national origin. Blanche's memo said the department would be working to penalize private sector companies with government contracts if they still have DEI policies on the books after President Trump issued an executive order to end what he said are discriminatory race and sex-based preferences in government work. Blanche said the False Claims Act would be the weapon used to go after corporations and schools that continue to adhere to racist policies. The Justice Department declined to comment, referring to its policy statement from earlier this year. Lawyers who practice in the area said it is unusual to see anti-fraud law used to pursue hot-button conservative policy objectives. Lisa Dykstra, a partner at Morgan Lewis, said companies have been closely reevaluating their workplace policies in light of the federal government's stance. Dykstra said she had never seen the government use its false claim authority to pursue concerns about compliance with federal anti-discrimination laws. These investigations are somewhat unique, she said. Healthcare fraud is typically the leading source of False Claims Act cases. Last year, the generic drug maker Teva Pharmaceuticals USA agreed to pay $425 million to resolve allegations that it paid patients copays for a multiple sclerosis drug while steadily rising prices for the drug, causing false claims to Medicare. There have also been notable cases against defense contractors. Raytheon, a subsidiary of Virginia-based RTX, agreed to pay $428 million last year to resolve allegations that it provided false cost and pricing data when it negotiated contracts with the Defense Department. If the Justice Department brings a false claims lawsuit based on a company's diversity initiatives, it could be difficult to prove in court, legal observers say, because the government will have to show that a company made a misrepresentation when it secured its government contract and submitted a claim it should have known was false. Still, investigations have rattled the corporate world because the financial consequences can be significant. If the Justice Department brings a civil false claim lawsuit and wins in court, defendants risk being liable for 3 times the damages the government suffered. DEI isn't the only area in which the Trump administration is using the law unconventionally. The Justice Department separately is looking for evidence that doctors are billing Medicaid for treatments for transgendered youth that are banned in certain states. The department said in July that it had sent more than 20 subpoenas to doctors and clinics. Some patients and hospitals are asking courts to toss out these subpoenas, which broadly seek children's medical records. Several judges have issued rulings that blocked or limited government's request. Daniel Michaels has written an article called "Trump Upends U.S. Policy by Attacking the European Union." President Trump and his team have spent much of the year railing at Europe, complaining about what they see as a cluster of countries too soft on immigration, weak on preserving democratic freedoms, and unwilling to pay the full cost of their defense. Their biggest target, though, is the European Union. The U.S. has helped create the institution from the wreckage of World War II, but Washington now regards it as an over-regulated bureaucracy incapable of responding swiftly to events and fulfilling its role as a U.S. ally. Trump's antipathy to the bloc represents the most fundamental reassessment of the U.S. transatlantic policy since the Cold War and is upending America's most important alliance. Administration officials say they are trying to strengthen the West and put a wayward Europe back on track. The position most recently articulated in Trump's new national security strategy hews to a long-standing MAGA criticism of the bloc as a supranational body squelching national character and initiative. Vice President J.D. Vance, a vocal proponent of the view, helped launch the administration's push in February with a speech in Munich where he referred to EU officials as commissars, using a title for Soviet officials. U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer earlier in December threatened the EU with tariff hikes or other trade action if it doesn't stop imposing fines on American tech companies, days after the bloc levied a $140 million penalty on the social media platform X. An EU spokesman said the bloc's rules apply equally and fairly to all companies that operate in it. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Tuesday that the U.S. would bar a former EU official from entering the country over his role in creating and enforcing an online content law that the administration has criticized for allegedly censoring Americans. By targeting the EU, a longtime focus of Russian vitriol, Trump is dispensing with decades of U.S. policy and putting the West in uncharted territory. For European leaders, however, the EU, with some 450 million consumers and a combined economic heft of more than $20 trillion, is key to their nation-states' ability to defend themselves and exert force on the world stage. They acknowledge the 27-country bloc is unwieldy, but see it as a defender of European sovereignty. The EU is also now working to lighten regulatory burdens that European companies say hurt their global competitiveness, although results aren't yet clear. Europe's independence will depend on its ability to compete in today's turbulent times, said European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who heads the bloc's executive arm, in her annual State of the EU speech in September. But we know the economic and geopolitical headwinds are strong, she said. Still, EU officials reject U.S. criticism of European democracy. Many view the attacks as based on American commercial self-interest. There will be no freedom of speech if citizens' freedom of information is sacrificed to defend the tech oligarchs of the United States, said European Council President Antonio Costa, who oversees the grouping of EU national leaders in response to the national security document. For many Europeans, including former European Central Bank President Mario Draghi, the EU, far from being a problem, offers the best hope for jump-starting their lagging economy. By deepening economic ties among members, the argument goes, the bloc might finally achieve the efficiencies and scale its vast market has long promised but failed to deliver. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Cannabis Rules Eased After Pitched Battle by Josh Dawsey. After a 2-hour Oval Office debate about marijuana in December, President Trump overrode some of the religious right, White House aides, and senior Republican lawmakers, and decided to reschedule the green leaf as a lower-level drug. Trump watched as Kim Rivers, the CEO of Trulieve, a Florida-based marijuana company, Gordon Smith, a Florida sheriff, and Howard Kessler, a Mar-a-Lago member and longtime Trump friend, argued the president should reschedule marijuana, according to people with knowledge of the meeting. It was time to open the door for medical research and approve access to cannabidiol products, they argued. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, on speakerphone urged the president against the decision, and senior aides warned the move could be dangerous to some Americans. After listening, Trump, who eschews alcohol and drugs, sided with the pro-marijuana camp and delivered the biggest softening of federal cannabis policy since U.S. states began legalizing recreational marijuana in 2012. It was a little surreal, said Rivers in an interview. The decision to reschedule marijuana from a Schedule I drug to a Schedule III drug followed an aggressive 18-month lobbying campaign by Rivers. The CEO and her company cut large checks to Trump's political groups, attended at least 3 fundraisers, repeatedly raised the issue with White House aides, and hired influential lobbyists. Conservative and religious leaders, such as the Faith and Freedoms Coalition Ralph Reed, had asked the White House not to reclassify the drug, saying it could be a gateway to other drugs and didn't fit with the president's agenda. Heidi Overton, a top aide on the Conservative Domestic Policy Council, repeatedly weighed in against it, including in the meeting where Trump made the decision, people with knowledge of the meeting said. Through a spokeswoman, she declined to comment. Some White House officials, including Deputy Chief of Staff James Blair, told Trump that many Republicans were opposed, and aides showed him a letter signed by 22 senators urging against it, White House officials said. The only winners from rescheduling will be bad actors such as Communist China, while Americans will be left paying the bill, the senators wrote. For many months, the policy seemed to be on hold. Rivers first met with Trump on marijuana in summer 2024, when she cut a 7-figure check to a political group helping him, people familiar with the meeting said. Trump then supported a referendum allowing recreational marijuana in Florida. Trump also said on the campaign trail that he would reschedule the drug, but it wasn't on his first slate of executive orders. Rivers hired lobbyists close to Trump, including Brian Ballard and Nick Iorosi. White House officials described Rivers as particularly aggressive in making her case. Trulieve gave another $750,000 to the inauguration. After Trump indicated to Rivers and other donors at a New Jersey fundraiser this summer that he would follow through on rescheduling the drugs, industry officials were hopeful. That fundraiser was billed at $1 million a guest. Behind the scenes, White House officials expressed frustration, people familiar with the matter said, and Trump waffled when publicly asked about rescheduling days later. Rivers didn't give up and came to a golf fundraiser for Senator Lindsey Graham, a Republican from South Carolina, in November. She and Trump spoke briefly, and she asked for a White House meeting. Rivers' efforts appeared to be bearing fruit when Trump invited her to the Oval Office to make her case. She is met in the Oval Office by Overton, who disagreed, and Trump did not make a final decision. A follow-up meeting was scheduled, and Rivers asked Gordon Smith, the sheriff of Bradford County, a small county in northern Florida between Jacksonville and Tallahassee, to join her. She also brought 2 cancer survivors and a Duke University professor. Smith had become one of the first conservative sheriffs to endorse recreational marijuana use. Inside the Oval Office, Trump talked with Kessler, a financial executive who has advocated for medical cannabis, and others about expensive properties in Palm Beach, donations to the White House ballroom, and a golf course he wanted to renovate in Washington, Smith recalled. Kessler did not respond to requests for comment. Trump reviewed polling on rescheduling and said he had heard from many people, including boxer Mike Tyson, that he should reschedule. He continually reiterated they were not legalizing it. Smith said that Dr. Mehmet Oz, who leads Medicaid and Medicare, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy, and White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles also watched the debate. Wiles left early. At one point, Trump zeroed in on Smith. He turned to me and said, "Sheriff, what do you think?" Smith's brother, a military veteran, has been helped by medical marijuana, he said, and he believed it was safer than alcohol and other substances. The sheriff's concern, he said, was fentanyl-laced marijuana that killed people. When Speaker Johnson called in, the president put him on the phone with the sheriff, who tried to persuade Johnson. "It's a gateway drug," Johnson argued, according to the sheriff. Johnson declined to comment through a spokesman. After about 2 hours, Trump said he was going to reschedule the drug and said he wanted to post on Truth Social, the sheriff recalled. The lawyers and his staff, they started yelling, "No, sir, you can't do that. There's a 30-day period," Smith said. Trump invited Smith to come back next week and see him sign the order, but Smith said he couldn't. He had to attend an execution in Florida that evening. Trump told others that Rivers had pushed him to do it, said people familiar with the matter. A powerful winter storm was sweeping east from the plains on Sunday, driven by what meteorologists described as an intense cyclone that was expected to affect much of the country with a mixture of snow, ice, rain, and strong winds. Part of the storm system is getting heavy snow. Other parts of the storm along the cold front are getting higher winds and much colder temperature as the front passes, according to Bob Oravec, a lead forecaster at the National Weather Service office in College Park, Maryland. Snow and strengthening winds spread Sunday across the upper Midwest, where the National Weather Service warned of whiteout conditions and possible blizzard conditions that could make travel impossible in some areas. Snowfall totals were expected to exceed a foot across parts of the upper Great Lakes, with up to 2 feet possible along the south shores of Lake Superior. In the south, meteorologists warn of severe thunderstorms expected to signal the arrival of a sharp cold front, sometimes referred to as a blue norther, bringing a sudden plunge in temperatures and strong north winds that will end days of record warmth around the region. In New Jersey, helicopters collide, one person killed. 2 helicopters crashed midair in New Jersey on Sunday, killing one person and critically injuring another, authorities said. Hamilton Police Chief Kevin Friel said rescuers responded to a report of an aviation crash at about 11:25 a.m. Video from the scene shows a helicopter spinning rapidly to the ground. Police and fire crews subsequently extinguished flames that engulfed one of the helicopters. The Federal Aviation Administration described the crash as a mid-air collision between an Enstrom F-28A helicopter and an Enstrom 280C helicopter over Hamilton Municipal Airport. Only the pilots were aboard each aircraft. The FAA and National Transportation Safety Board will be investigating the crash. A Portland fire hits Old Port waterfront. A fire tore through the historic Old Port waterfront in Portland the day after Christmas, damaging aging buildings and several boats. Flames and smoke spread easily through the structures along the Custom House Wharf, a 19th and 20th century hub for Portland's fishing industry that now includes seafood restaurants, authorities said. The cause of the fire is still under investigation, and one firefighter sustained minor injuries. First responders deployed a fireboat to spray water from the harbor to help douse flames due to issues caused by frozen fire hydrants, according to news reports. Several boats were damaged, and at least one sank along the wharf. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the December 29th edition of the Wall Street Journal. We read from the Wall Street Journal every Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. Your reader has been Val. Thank you for listening.